Tak, bo będę mówić, drodzy ludzie po drugiej stronie. No jak mam się nie ruszać? Teraz no jak? To już tu. Tu możesz, ale do tyłu nie, bo ostrość. Yes. Bam, bam, bam. And we invite you now for the second part of amazing sessions of the day after a lunch break. And please stay with us, comment, write your questions, and we will try to answer them, to pass it to our speakers, so stay with us. And now we will have a pleasure to listen to Procedural Rhetoric in Larps. This is really interesting because I want to learn more about it, so I really hope that Asia Volodina from Russia, a playwright and organizer of Larps for about 20 years, will tell us more about it. She created both small freeform and chamber LARPs in Russia and in Nordic context, as well as big Russian-speaking LARPs like Constantinople, Life Course, Deus Ex Machina, and also she's an artist and collaborated with many museums and galleries all around the world. Yeah, Russia, America, Europe, come on, this is all around Europe. So, big bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Asia Volodina. Thank you for this beautiful presentation. My main background, as was said, is playing and organizing mostly in Russian and international context. So examples which I will have today are from Russian, Belarusian, and international LARPs. Anyway, I do believe that the term that I will discuss today and this approach that I will discuss today is applicable to all LARPs, and I hope it can help you in your game design and maybe game analysis as well. I feel that this my talk somehow continues the first session yesterday, because as well as Alessandro's and Ivan's talk, it offers some frame how to think about some specific parts of LARP design, but I will do this in some more practical, more specific way. I will talk about this more narrow topic. So, procedural rhetoric. Who of you have ever heard about this term? Lovely. Okay. So then I have the next question. Who of you ever used it in your LARP design or talking about LARPs? Okay. Never mind. So what is it? Now I will tell you shortly. Rhetoric in general is an art of how you can persuasive convey some ideas to other people. And classical rhetoric, as it usually this term is used, is about how you do this through language, through effective presentation, through writing or speaking, something like that. But procedural rhetoric, which is used now more and more widely in game studies, analyzes the art of persuasion using rules and processes. And when we talk about games, it means mostly gameplay. So in general, this is about how we can pass some ideas, how we can share ideas or pass them each other through gameplay. This term was first used in 2007 by Jan Bogost, and here is the name of the book where he used this. He is a researcher about video games. So mostly so far this term is used in video games, but I do believe that for us it's not less useful than for video game designers and researchers. Because I do believe that games are communication. And not just in the sense that when we play or when we organize LARP, we communicate to each other, players communicate to each other, and all this about this communication. But the game itself is a medium. So this phenomenon is actually about passing some ideas. It's about to pass, share, create ideas through the LARP. And it is cool to keep in mind these ideas about procedural rhetoric in order to do this more consciously. Because sometimes it actually happens when people do something and don't keep in mind actually what they have done. So players have some ideas through gameplay, and this was even not something that game designer thought about. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is the main part of this talk, is I'm going to give you several examples of how through some rules or mechanics different LARP organizers talked about one topic. And through that we can see how differently through gameplay, not through the story itself, players could perceive the ideas of the LARP. Just shortly, I want to remind this slide that procedural rhetoric is about using rules and processes, and let's go to the examples. I choose fight and war in general as an example because there are so many different LARPs that used fight and war mechanics, and we can compare them easily in a way of how was the different gameplay in them for players. So one of the most often, at least in Russian-speaking community, way to do some fight systems is, of course, hit system. It's when every character has several hits, and based on, I don't know, some additional stuff, it can be more or less. And the fighting is actually physical, and when some sword touches your body, then you lose one hit or not one hit, and so everything is done through this. What is it? It is a fair play. It is based on physical things. It is. It gives you this feeling of actually how it happens, and you can physically be involved and immersed in the situation. But at the same time, it gives you the feeling of how it is done quite fair, if not just players try to cheat. Because there are rules, and you know how to win. This is another example. I took it from New Atlantis of House League, although I do believe that this one was used in some other LARPs as well. Here you had much more simple idea. If one person has a gun, and if this gun is pointed at you and say, "Baba," you are killed. This gives you super different gameplay experience. The one who has a gun is almighty, and the one who has not a gun is so much weaker and has so less opportunities. And this is super different thing to tell us about fighting and about war. Although here, it wasn't about war, and this is an important thing. Important thing that in this game, which was a post-apocalypse LARP about some group of people who are struggling for 2 months in a desolated world, all of them were weak. And when they actually met somebody with a gun, it was super not usual, very special situation for them. The Great War. This game was made by one Israeli and several Russian LARP organizers. And it talked about situation in between Romans and Jews in 1st century after Christ, but in some modern circumstances. So the story was about this old style situation between Romans and Jews. I don't remember exactly in which year, some very particular year, but also they used strike ball guns. Also they used smartphones, also they used communication through Telegram, and it presented some important models, some important ideas about how that society worked and how ideas were spread. But the mechanic I want to tell you about right now is mechanic about how characters, when they participated in some fighting situation and by the rules, which was apparently just a hit system, were killed. It was done that every player had not just their character, that was their primary character that they played, but also they had several imaginary relationship of this character, like several friends or colleagues or some else important person to them. And when in the situation of fighting they were killed by rules, it was supposed that not their main character was killed, but one of their friends or one of their colleagues. And the player continued the game in their main character, playing them, but with another story about how their closest friend, their brother, their sister, was killed in this very particular situation that was very emotional because they actually were there. And this was another type of telling the story, because the main idea of this LARP, the main thing what this LARP was about to talk about, was about how radicalization happens. Of course, this organizer was interested in analyzing situation around her, around all of us, and how violence always lead us to more violence, and how every another death lead us to some more close by people dead and more radicalization and more this stuff. You got the idea, I guess. One more example. This was less than a year ago, Tudors plus Valois. Very interesting that exactly the same topic is now used for one of widely advertised international LARP, although I do believe that they have a bit different approaches. This game had many different complicated and interesting mechanics, but the one I want to point to right now is on the photo to the left, because what is Tudors plus Valois? It is about meeting of two kings with their two courts somewhere in very, I don't know, magnificent situation, intrigues, politics, and other stuff like that. Of course, all these people are the most powerful people of their times. Of course, when the war is happening, it is happening. Of course it's happening. It's, what is it, 15th, 16th century. But none of them are there on the field right now. They are mostly leading the powers. They are looking at the map from above. They just move their troops. They just decide. They just negotiate. They just betray each other, but not in a way of betrayal on the war field, but on this battlefield. So it was made this strategic map. There were very beautiful small figures. There were some complicated rules of how you should pay for them, or how you can move them, who will win in which situation, and all this stuff. So the game itself was about how politics happens behind curtains, and this was the field where actually this, what was happening behind the curtains, was realized. Stars love us. This is a short chamber LARP. Maybe not chamber, I think that you use usually a bit different term for that. It was about some war in space. And the important part of the LARP were fights in space, where every character was paired with their peer. And in these small spaceships, they fought against some awful aliens. It is short, small LARP that happens usually in like one space, in one room. And how to give all this feeling of how space war, space fights can happen. And what is more important, how to give the feeling first of camaraderie, second of that there are different types of occupation and different people should do some different stuff. And the most important, how they should support each other, how they are tied together and cannot do anything without each other. So they were in pairs, and one of the space fighters had blindfold, and another one was the one who said him what to do. There were some things on the floor which you could reach in some special way. Another one was standing behind the wall and couldn't move. There were some special rules how one can lead another one. And this was also about how you can rely on your partner, or cannot, but mostly can. And this was the main thing that was made through this gameplay experience. How through your experience of leading and doing what your peers said, this camaraderie actually forms. And also, it was a very fast way to make a difference between those who were in fights and were experienced in it and got this experience super fast because game is short, and those who are newbies and never were there. So when they came back, this difference was super much seen. For this LARP, I couldn't find a picture, but it doesn't matter because the fight system in this game was also used closed eyes. This one is a game. Yeah, this one is a game about how to say it? Just ordinary people and some living in ordinary recent time place, and some migrants who live there, and about very recent time modern wars and other situations that happen. Usually, when you are some of our people who used to go to the war in like our ordinary situation, what is war for you? It's house, it's some physical thing, it's not often understanding what is going on, sometimes it's difficult decisions or something like that. So the mechanic in this case was that all the people formed two lines, they closed their eyes, they put their hands in front of them, and they started to go towards each other, saying, fight, 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 fight all together. If one got to another person and just felt them, they pushed towards each other and stayed like this, like that, as long as possible. If they didn't, they went all the way till the wall, another one, and it was supposed that they crossed the line of war and that they were in the back positions of their opponents, and that they have to decide themselves, narratively, what war crime they did to get back to their troops. Also, there were different situations when they could fall down and be or someone who tries to, like in guerrilla way, to keep another one, or when they were wounded, they just fell down and cried and shouted and asked for mom. I will not now do this more detailed, but the idea, I think, is clear. That it is about not actually knowing what is going on, about trying to do what you have to do, about sometimes getting in some awful situations without actually being fault in this, well, with no fault for these situations, and about sometimes just lying down on the ground, just crying for mom, or crawling, which is difficult physical thing. In this slide, I was supposed to let you compare how different are the stories that this gameplay are telling through this, through these mechanics. But I kinda already did this. And as you might notice, all the examples that I had so far are about gameplay that is formed by mechanics or rules. Of course, gameplay can be formed differently. Of course, we can use structure of the game, stories, communication before the game, and many other things. But all of you are experienced LARP writers, and I do believe we can have another very long talk about how differently gameplay can be formed. Yeah, so I decided to tell you a bit more about doing this through mechanics and rules, which I do believe might be examples that you haven't heard about before. So, couple more examples to not just stuck on fight mechanics, because of course you can also give this different experience through gameplay, not just about fighting and not just about killing each other. Vampires experience in Minsk. I call it like this because I don't know exactly what was the name of the LARP, but it was made by my friends, and they told me how it worked. It was like city vampire game when some people were vampires, or maybe even all players, and of course sometimes they have to hunt and to eat. And of course it would be nice to do this and to play with this with ordinary people, like just going around the streets. And they did, because this was many years ago, and surveillance in Belarus was not that awful as it is now, and it was possible to do something like that. So the idea was that you can find any person on the street, not player, and go after them, like stalk, without them noticing it, without anybody noticing that you are stalking them, and do this until you are in some quiet place where there are nobody but you two. And at this point, it was count that, of course, you were successful, you ate this person. In a perfect way, these people never realized they participated in the game. Although I'm not quite sure how good it worked. Maybe some realized. No. Okay. Of course, these give you this quite strange experience of being this really not so nice and strange and creepy person. Exactly what we hope to do when we are vampires in LARP. Sex and death mechanics, it was said to me by the same LARP organizer, Minsk, smart and very talented writer. In one of his games, to kill somebody and to have sex somebody, you have to go together. So there was like almost the same rules. You have to go together to some dark place. And in this dark place, you have to tell the person what are you doing to them. What this gave to LARP. This gave the experience that sex actually is about quite vulnerability, and that when you are going with somebody so far, it actually means that you open to them and is ready to be vulnerable. Let's do it shortly. 7 minutes.
There had
Okay.
to be consent? Or when you take someone to the dark place, does this person have
I
to consent?
don't know anything about other structure of this game. I don't know how organized safety mechanics in them. Maybe if you're really interested, I can ask later. Thank you. Then I will skip a couple more examples, and you see I have much more. Feel free to ask later. The one that I will mention now is the one that actually pushed me to have this talk. It's about memories and oblivion and the secrets we keep, again, of House League. Thank you, Alessandro. The idea is that they were quite, I'd say, basic for many Nordic LARPs rules by forming new memories or new parts of your common background. When one could say, do you remember that we did that and that? And another one could answer, yes, I do, or no, I don't. And this is how we can form, during the game, some more ideas and some more backgrounds. So I think you all did this at some point, or heard about this. Why I thought about this in this case? It is so basic usually for many Nordic-style LARPs that usually doesn't mean anything in like gameplay, like in procedural rhetoric meaning. But here, the game itself was about memories and oblivion. And this was so beautifully incorporated into the story. And this was so natural to do it like this and to suddenly remember something. And this is a good example to talk about some silent mechanics and some talking mechanics. Of course, we all have some mechanics that we use just because we always use them, like in many Russian-speaking Larps, we use hit mechanics for fighting just because we do it always. And if all your players always do this, it's like saying you nothing. It's just some basement, and just changing of this will mean something. But, as you can see here, it also can be used consciously. And it's much better when you have in your LARP design something first that you know how works and how it helps the idea of the game, the story of the game, the style of the game to be perceived. And second, when you use something just because you have to build the structure of the game, you just have to have some fighting, at least be conscious if for this gameplay not be against what you want to make this LARP about. There is another term, ludonarrative dissonance. This is what actually happens when there is a conflict between narrative told through the story and narrative told through gameplay. It's another term from video game experience and researching, and you can also find it there. So, outcome. I think it's always nice to question yourself when you make LARP, or question somebody else when you try to criticize something else, somebody else's LARP. What does gameplay says to my players? Do I want to say this by my LARP? Which elements of design are talking and which are silent? And of course, am I sure that they're actually silent? Or are they against what I want to say by my LARP? Thank you. We have 3 minutes for questions if you have them. And if you don't have them now and want to think about this more and want to communicate to me later, here are my contacts. Thank you. There is a question.
Actually, it's not a question. It's an example I've heard yesterday from two Piotrs who were making the workshops about writing the LARPs, that they invented the mechanic in a world like Harry Potter, when there were two people casting a spell to each other. Then in one hand they were casting the spell, and in the other they were throwing balls at the same time. And the person who catch the ball later won the spell. So he made a hit.
Okay. What is the question?
Oh, that's not a question. That's an example.
This is an example. Nice. We have many more examples, but it is always important that we have many examples of bad mechanics. When we use something just because we think that it should be puzzle here, it should be fight here, it should be something else here, and it doesn't correspond to anything of our LARP experience at all. Would be better to have less of that.
Thank you for the presentation. I saw you choose war and fight as a better example for the short of time of the talk as a mechanic. Do you have any other themes that are very suitable for rhetorics other than the one you present in the talk?
You mean, can I have more examples of good procedural rhetoric and other topics?
What other topics can be addressed by rhetorical?
Any.
Okay.
Actually,
there is someone that you think can fit better, because war fit better, memories too, but maybe or you
all
think
of them. I do believe that all gameplay you have in game can be thought through this term and done good in terms of procedural rhetoric, and all of them can be done not so good. So there is. Okay, thank you.